Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter and on TikTok. Folks, please do send in your messages, please send in your comments, and please tell us where you are watching from and we'll give you a shout out. Interesting day today. The new First Minister of Scotland was sworn in. Mr. Humza Yousaf will be talking about what that bodes for Scotland, good or ill. And at the bottom of the hour, we have a very knowledgeable guest on that subject. It's David Scott, the journalist from the alternative news media channel UK Column. And David is well known for his analysis and his insight on these matters. So we're going to be speaking to him at 7:30. That'll just be shortly after our competition at the bottom of the hour, which will be after our On This Day in British History Matters. So, what a very interesting political situation has developed in Scotland. What are your thoughts about it? Is Humza going to be good or bad for the Union? And what have been your impressions of him so far? And if you're a Scottish nationalist on TikTok, please tell us why you think this is your man to deliver the promised land. Tell us why you think this is your man to lead us out of the Egypt, which is the United Kingdom, and to lead you to the land of milk and honey, because clearly quite a lot of you have put your faith in this chap, and we'd definitely be interested to know why. So please do tell us in order to educate us on that particular matter. Okay, so nice to see people coming in already. Debbie, TC was first in as it happens. Hi TC. Good evening all fellow unionists everywhere around the world. Everywhere around the world. Lovely to see Alistair live on UNN on Monday night. It was a great chat with David Clues. Well, thank you TC for that, and I really enjoyed it. We spoke with David Clues for half an hour, and that was on his channel, dlive.tv/Unity News. Really enjoyed that and glad you were watching, TC. Good evening to Debbie. Always nice to see Debbie in the house, as well as Paul Hadlow from Kent. And to Niall. Niall, I don't think you'll mind me saying, is going to be our guest next week. So we're very much looking forward to talking with Niall on a lot of the matters that are close to our heart. And to Adam from Leicestershire, and to Harry Brown, who says good evening AFFG and unionists, hope all are well. I've been busy these last couple of Wednesdays. Well, good to see you back in the room, Harry. And Alan said he had some information for us earlier today. No doubt he'll tell us what that was. Adam wonders what we think of Useless entering power. Jockey B says, how long do you give Humza? That's the £6,000 question, isn't it? How long is he going to last? How long will the media give him? How long will the SNP supporters give him? There's clearly a lot of support for him, though, in the party, and in a moment we'll just look at what those figures were for his actual voting numbers. Adam says, let us mention Paul O'Grady, who passed away aged 67, who was an entertainer on the telly, and I actually saw him live once at the Edinburgh Fringe. That was way back 1994 or something like that. Stephen says, hello Alistair and all unionist friends and colleagues. And Ryan says, good evening from West Yorkshire, and Stuart from Elgin. And Nelson. Harry says, rest in peace Paul O'Grady. Mum used to love watching his show on Channel 4, I think it was. Stephen from Belfast, the heart of the empire. Saw a very interesting article today which we put up on our Facebook page about how it was the Southern Ireland which initially set up the hard border in across the north of Ireland because they wanted separate custom and tax duties from the rest of the British state. You can find that very fascinating article by a man who's written a book on the very subject. You can find that on our facebook.com/UK A Force for Good. Hello to Catherine. Stephen says, that's not a cabinet, Yusuf has just declared. It's an absolute shambles. Yes, it's like a spare drawer rather than a cabinet. It's a spare drawer where you keep all your bits and pieces, old bits of sellotape, old bits of blue tack, old badges, all that kind of stuff. That's what he's assembled, not so much an actual cabinet. D. Stanner says, I was very close to Bute House today about 11:30. Plenty of mainstream media, but interestingly no flag waving, Nats shouting freedom. Might have still been in bed at 11:30, D. Stanners. AR Entertainment says, hello from the heart of rural England. R.I.P. Paul O'Grady. Niles, looking forward to next week. Fantastic. And to Kat, hope you had a nice time last week in the great British city of Lincoln. I know you mentioned that you were there. Great. Well, hi Frankie. Let's have a look at the actual voting figures that Humza got. And we've got a graphic that we'll just bring up here and I'll read them out. And after the first, it was one of these voting methods where you vote 1, 2, 3 for your first, your second and your third favourite people. And there you go. The first preference result, Humza got 24,336 votes. That's 48.2%. And Kate Forbes came in at about 41%, and then Ash Regan down at 11%. And then what happened is they redistributed Ash Regan's second preferences. And of those, the majority went to Kate Forbes, but a sufficient number went to Humza Yousaf to give him the overall number. So let's just see the second graphic. I just put that up there to guide my point, but in the second column there it said in total 1,696 of Regan's backers put Yousaf as their second preference, and 3,331 put Forbes. So they get redistributed, and it ends up with Humza Yousaf has got 52% of the vote and Kate Forbes got 48%, which is to say 26,000 versus 23,890. So if sufficient numbers of Regan's people had given Forbes their second vote, then she would in fact have won. So it was fairly close there, fairly close, a difference of just about 1,200 at the end of the day. Okay, so what that says is the party is essentially split as far as Humza and his support is concerned. So what is that going to bode for the future? Well, we read the National, so you don't have to, and I read this letter here, some of which I'll repeat to you. New SNP leader will face a massive task. And it mirrors my thinking very well, and it's from a very well-known Scottish nationalist. And he says, there is no candidate who, and this was written the day before the result, there is no candidate who, should they win, wouldn't be unpopular with almost as many people as favour them. He goes on to say, none of the candidates is going to reverse the precipitous decline in membership. Each will deter as many as they attract. He goes on to say personally that he'd consider joining the SNP again if Ash Regan were to win. But I know that vanishing few among the old guard and the Sturgeonistas will be prepared to give her a chance. Humza Yousaf appears to be oblivious to the problems that would face him. His record suggests that he will almost certainly be overwhelmed from day one. It seems that there is no outcome which does not spell disaster for the SNP. It seems to be only a question of whether it is a catastrophic disaster or merely a major disaster. The election may produce a leader, but they won't be in charge. They won't be in control. There is a gruesome irony in the fact that Nicola Sturgeon's control freakery has ultimately left the SNP rudderless. Who would be the captain of that ship? And that's from a chap called Peter Bell. New SNP leader will face a massive task. And that sums up really exactly what many of us have been thinking as far as that is concerned. Who would you vote for in the next election? Well, that's a very good question, says somebody on TikTok. Jockey B says that more people voted for Lionel Richie on Starstruck on Saturday night. And that's rubbish, he says. And he's got a good point there. A very good point. As Alan says, only 1/3 of SNP members voted for Humza. Stephen says, so Humza is our First Minister with a total of 26,000 votes, or 0.5% of the total electorate. Should we be calling for a Holyrood election? Well, Humza Yousaf did say that he was considering, this was prior to him being elected, he did say that if he were to be elected, he would consider having a snap Holyrood election in order to legitimise himself. However, I think, quite frankly, that's very unlikely, because there's as much chance of them crashing as not. What would happen is that he would have to get sufficient numbers in Parliament to basically make that happen. And it's probably unlikely that he would be able to do that. That would possibly lead to a first split, a major policy split in the party, because there'll be many MSPs in the SNP and Green parties who do not want to face the public, who are quite happy sitting in their well-recompensed seats until May 2026. They don't want to give that up for the sake of some ideological point of view. So that's really not going to happen. I suppose we could call for it simply just to irritate them, if nothing else. TC says, I do believe Humza will lose the vote of the good, honest, ordinary Scottish people. That should be the case, shouldn't it? And Mr. Shades says they need to look at the more important issues that are out there to be tackled. And as for another referendum, well, he's not going to get that until circumstances change remarkably so, which, touch wood, they never will change in his favour. Graham got a point here. Unionism has a great opportunity here, so let's make the most of it to make sure everybody who believes in this great union gets out and votes in the local elections. Well, the local elections are in England, yes, and push the neighbours, even the next door's cat, if it is allowed to vote, to give the SNP a bloody nose. Well, the local elections in Scotland were last year. They're held at a different rate from ones in England, but we do have by-elections, and if there is a by-election, then do vote at them. And the SNP have been suffering lately at the few council by-elections that have been held. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland says someone needs to teach Humza some British values because he clearly doesn't understand any. Hello to Derek. Good to have you in the house, Derek. Thanks for all your support. And please share the programme there like Catherine does. If you're watching it on Twitter, please give us a retweet. Better still, give us a quote tweet, which means that we can then retweet your quote tweet and share it across YouTube and so on, because we are being, it feels like we're often shadow banned. I hope we're not being, but sometimes it can feel like that. And who's going to be the first to jump ship over to Alba? Ian says the only chance the SNP had of losing the next election died when Kate and Ash didn't win. That's too many double negatives in that for me to know what you meant. The only chance the SNP had of losing. Okay. So, yes, here's something that we're going to talk about when our guest comes on at the bottom of the hour. Or should we leave it? Let's just throw up the picture of Humza today praying in Bute House, which I thought was very interesting. And this was the first picture that many of us woke up to this morning, which is a picture of Humza Yousaf praying in Bute House with his mother and father behind him. And I don't know who these four guys are. Four random blokes. I don't know. Are they his brothers or something? I don't know. So it's a rather strange photograph, I have to say. And he doesn't give any context. He simply says here, he goes, quote, "My family and I spending our first night in Bute House after today's parliamentary vote. A special moment leading my family in prayer in Bute House, as is customary after breaking fast together." So that's an intriguing photograph that's been all around the world. What's your thoughts on that? I wonder if Kate Forbes had won and if she had decided to hold a prayer meeting of the Free Church of Scotland, if it would have been greeted in similar manner. Interesting. Okay. Adam thinks he prays more than once a day. It's strange that, because he doesn't appear to be a particularly religious man. He doesn't go about talking about his faith in the way that religious people would tend to do. So how much of it is real and how much of it is for show? Anyway, that was certainly a show that he put on with that photograph. Stephen says Kate was criticised for mentioning religion and Christian values. Then we see this from Humza. Yes, very, very interesting. Very interesting. It certainly is. Alan says, when is the next Holyrood election? It's May 2026. So we've got another over 3 years yet of Humza Yousaf, if he lasts that long. My own feeling is that he probably will last that long. And I say that because I don't think there's anybody else wants to pick up the particular poison chalice. And he does have a good track record of being able to ride failure since he began his career in the Scottish Parliament in 2011 as a 26-year-old. So the man is only 37. I mean, he's a young bloke, and he's been thrust up into that situation in a way that most young fellows his age never have that opportunity. He's just been able to get to where he is for a variety of reasons, which he's been able to take advantage of. But certainly very unusual. So we've got our guest. I see our guest is in the studio. We'll be bringing our guest on at 7:30 in 8 minutes, and we'll be talking about exactly the sort of things that I've just been mentioning. Now, there was another picture of Humza. Yes, I'm going to just quickly bring up a picture here of Humza, because Humza is now the keeper of the Great Seal of Scotland. There he is. That was him pictured this morning with the Great Seal of Scotland. Now, what that is a it's mainly, of course, just I don't know to what extent it's used regularly, but the idea is that you put wax in there and then you stamp it and you attach that to the laws and the documents, and that gives the official seal of the king. And whether that's the new King Charles seal or not, but on the left hand side there is a picture of the Queen, if it's still the Queen Elizabeth seal, and on the right hand side is a very unifying symbol that was created by our man James VI, who became King of Great Britain. When he became king, he changed the royal seal of Scotland to introduce an English lion holding a cross of St. George, along with the unicorn holding the saltire. So in fact, we've got this SNP man there standing in front of a very unifying artifact, and you can't see the designs on it, but on the right hand side, it's called the Royal Seal of Scotland as used in the United Kingdom, and there's a picture that we'll just put up of it, which you can see on the market cross. That's what appears on the seal, on one of the seals there, the reverse of the seal. That's what appears, which is the royal coat of arms as used in Scotland, with the lion and the unicorn, the saltire and the cross of St. George. So I do hope that Humza looked at that and he studied it and he thought, what's all that about then? And he thought maybe that would make him start to look into our British history and how we, the Scots and the English, came together, and what a valuable thing that absolutely is. Okay. Now, just before our guest, we are going to ask a question, and the question in our competition will be for one of the very last remaining original issues of our AFFG badge. We no longer do this style of badge, which is indented enamel. We don't do that anymore. We've got 2 left, of which this is one, and we're giving it away as a prize. It would otherwise be selling for $5.99, and we'll ask a question shortly after On This Day in British History, because British history matters. Well, it was on this day that Queen Victoria opened up what I'm calling the British Constitution in brickwork. Now, what does that mean? Well, it is the Royal Albert Hall was opened today on this day, 29th of March in 1871. One of the most famous venues in the world. We'll stick up a picture of it there. And of course, host of the annual proms. And there it is. In front of it, there is also the Albert Memorial at the top of Kensington Park. And it was Albert's vision to create that auditorium in order to promote what he called the appreciation of arts and sciences. And it was built on profits from the 1851 Great Exhibition, which Albert had also organised. But then he was to die, and it was to be completed by his collaborator, a chap called Henry Cole. And when Victoria was there to give her speech, her opening speech, she was too overcome with emotion, and her son Edward had to read out her speech. But her only known description of it is she is supposed to have said that it, quote, reminded her of the British Constitution, close quote, perhaps due to its apparent perfection. And there's another picture from the other side here of the Royal Albert Hall. There you go. And if you haven't been in that area of London, check it out, and especially check out that memorial, which you can just view. It's astonishing. It's an astonishing memorial. It's perhaps the most elaborate memorial to one person in the British Isles, apart from perhaps the Walter Scott Monument in Edinburgh. So that was on this day, and the Royal Albert Hall was made, as you can see there, mainly from bricks. 6 million of them, allegedly. Okay. That was on this day in British history. And Niall says, perfection indeed. Absolutely. Mr. Shade says, as a Jewish man myself, I am so proud of our country. Double O Mo says, St. Andrew died on a cross for the belief that Jesus died on a cross and rose again. The flag of Scotland memorialises the cross that St. Andrew died on, which was a saltire because he didn't want to die on a crucifix. He didn't consider himself worthy of that. So the question is, what does Humza believe? Says Double O Mo. Now, folks, please enter our competition. If you haven't entered it before, please just send your email to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and the first person with the right answer to the question which I'm about to ask will get this sent to them tomorrow, along with a complimentary copy of our Busting Indie Myths issue 7, worth £3.50, and that's worth £5.99. There you go. And the question, send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk, is, on this day, 29th of March 1871, what great British building was opened in London? Easy question. Now, it's the bottom of the hour. It's my delight to welcome David Scott, who's been a worthy guest on our programme 2 or 3 times before. David is a host on the news channel UK column. Please do give a big hello to David. We're going to talk about the Humza Yousaf situation, and please do send in any comments or questions that you've got for David. Good evening, David.
Hello, how are you doing?
Very well. very well, and thank you very much for coming on the show and taking a break from all the work that you do for UK Column. And how many times do you appear on UK Column per week?
Well, we do a news programme on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, and I'll be on once or twice during the week on those. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays we put out interviews, and there's quite a lot of those. They're really fascinating. We get to talk to a lot of really informative people, really well-read, and often people who have made a stand, often people who have stood for what they believe and have been prepared to take the flak that comes with that. We've discovered, in fact, at one point I said to Nicola Sturgeon, personally, I said, talk is cheap. It's your actions that define you. We like people who will stand and who will say what they believe to be true, even when it costs them. Because then we can know that at least they mean it, right? They might be right, they might be wrong, but they're genuine, they're authentic, and they are standing for something they think is worth the trouble. And that says more than someone's own good opinion of him or herself. That says more than PR and spin. That says something about the content of the character. And we get to interview a lot of people like that, so that's a real pleasure as well.
That's a good point, and I like the word that you used, the authentic, and that perhaps brings us into the subject of tonight's debate, and indeed his authenticity, which is our man Humza, if I can put it like that. And certainly a strange character, a man who out of one side of his mouth appears to profess sort of godly religious views, and out of the other side of his mouth doesn't seem to necessarily go along with what one would expect from that particular point of view. Do you think that Humza Yousaf is, to use your word there, authentic?
Very strange man. There's a clear contradiction, right? I think during the hustings he described himself as a Christian Muslim. I don't know what that is, but he claims and has been visibly demonstrating, almost proclaiming, almost shouting his Muslim faith. But the religion he actually owes allegiance to is the religion of woke, right? Is the internationalist, far left, secular worldview. It's the neo-Marxist worldview. He buys all of it. He will not say anything against any part of it. And the Muslims in this country who are authentic and who know their faith and know their literature and know what they believe, they see through him. That's why they were supporting Kate Forbes, because they know he's not authentic. So what's the Islamic thing? Is it an identity? Is it sales? What is it? A unique selling proposition? USP? Is it something to give him the appearance of depth? I don't know. I've only met him once, and more on that in a moment. But there's certainly something isn't right, because he claims one set of beliefs and he claims another set of beliefs, and he claims not to see the contradiction. Now, either he's just dim, and we should not dismiss that possibility, or he doesn't have the intellectual courage to face the conflict that he is in the middle of. Either way, it doesn't generate trust. I think people would have a lot more trust for Kate Forbes, who was trying to be honest. I think for the most part was getting some way forward with that. There was a few things she said that were a bit concerning, but for the most part she was actually struggling with the contradiction between Christianity and politics, and there is one. Let's be quite honest about that. Politics is a dirty game. Christianity calls you to the very highest standards, and also says that Jesus Christ is king and the Lord God Almighty is sovereign, and those are the standards you follow, whereas politics is based on essentially some sort of sovereignty of mankind. Christianity views sovereignty of mankind as the problem. So there is a contradiction there, and at least Kate Forbes wasn't quite expressing it in those ways, but she was trying to at least be honest about the difficulties. Humza never has been.
No, that's well said. Yes, I think that he is a man of contradictions in a way, because he's a child of the SNP in the sense that he got put at top of their regional list in 2011 because the SNP needed a token Asian person, and that's just a fact. I mean, you can say he got there through sheer force of his ability, and certainly in the SNP he wasn't necessarily up against many challengers as far as that's concerned, but he had to get in, they had to get him in, and so they put him at number one at the top of the Glasgow regional list, and of course he was certain to get in. So he's been in, and from that moment on he has understood that he got his lucky break as a consequence of fitting in with doing what he was told by the SNP, and as a consequence of that, he's realised that he didn't get in because he was like a diehard Muslim. He got in because he was fitting in with the SNP at the time, and he's always known that he's had to fit in with that. So he's probably a conflicted character in the sense that one part of him draws him strongly to his particular family and heritage, while the other side draws him to his career, which is only there as a consequence of the liberal state and the woke elements of the SNP. So he's probably caught in there, and he's realised, well, what pays my bread and butter is being woke, but he's still wanting to hold on to his past as well as his heritage and so on. So he's probably conflicted in that way. I don't know if that's a fair thing to say, but that's how I see him when I see it, because that's how I imagine I would be if I was in his shoes. You know, I'd be conflicted in that sense.
I mean, this is one of the problems that many people, the way to their loyalty is they're bought. Cash is king, and one of the messages of Christianity is cash is not king, and you have to pick. You can serve Mammon or you can serve God. You can't serve both. Is he conflicted? I don't know, because I've actually never seen any sign of him recognising the conflict. Maybe that's one of the issues. I mean, with Nicola Sturgeon, you never saw any sign of doubt. One of her few, I thought, political qualities was she seemed to exclude all doubt from her mind, at least apparently, so she could speak without it being clouded by, awkward reality, events, facts, things like this. She would speak with apparent conviction, even though this was ignoring the issue. I don't know how someone does that, because it's inherently inauthentic, because you're not describing reality. But this is one of the things that woke does, right? Because woke, it's like witchcraft. They don't use language the way that we use language. We use language to describe reality. Words have meanings. The woke do not. They use language to create reality. So if they want to, an example that you'll be familiar with, if they want to create the reality of an independent Scotland that's part of the EU, an independent Scotland run by the Germans, and they want that, right? And there's a majority of Scots who are against that. They say to the majority of Scots, this is inevitable. It's already a done deal. We're almost there. It's absolutely inevitable. This is going to be, you may as well get on the right side of history, because this is the way we're going. It's all over. Bar the shouting, right? This is to demoralise people. This is to create the reality they want to be. They want you to believe. They want their opponents to believe that they've lost. right? This is an attempt to manipulate, to gaslight, to demoralise, to affect how people perceive realities. In fact, they're trying to create the reality.
Oh, very much so, and they're very good at doing that, and they get away with it as well. And just as a small example that springs to mind, and it's something that's close to our heart, is that the Scottish nationalist marches, they're always exaggerating them by huge factors, and they're having another march. They had already booked it in for the 6th of May, as it happens, it's the coronation day, but they're going ahead with it anyway. They have a march every May. Last year they had 773 people on it, and they said there was 5,000 on it. Well, this year I see from the National, they're already telling us that there's going to be 10,000 on it. Well, I can guarantee we'll be there, we'll be filming it, and there'll be around about the same as there was last year, give or take a couple of hundred, probably less than 1,000, but we'll see. But they've already got the headlines. There's 10,000 marching against the King in Glasgow. You know, this nonsense. And that gets written into history until you don't know any better. And so they're very good at just doing that. But it's called lying as well. It's a thing that you and I wouldn't want to do.
Let me tell you about the one time I've met Humza.
Yes,
it was interesting.
Yeah.
Back in 2016, in the run-up to the Brexit referendum, the BBC were doing a hustings type thing in Glasgow. So I got a ticket and along I went. It was a strange event because the first thing you were asked is, are you pro-Brexit or are you pro-EU or are you undecided? So you would then reveal your position, and the BBC people would put a badge, big sticky badge on you, and the audience was arranged from Brexit to undecided to pro-EU. So off we went, and there was a trawlerman from Peterhead who'd come down for this, and he was wanting to get out of the EU quite badly, and was a fine, forthright gentleman. So he was describing why he wanted to leave, and he referred to Nicola Sturgeon, and he called her Mrs. Murrell, which is, after all, one of her names. Humza went mental. Right? It stood up, publicly berated him, live on air, this was going out, about how disrespectful and how Nicola Sturgeon was this fine and that fine. So he completely white-knighted for her. Right? He took huge exception. He went after this poor trawlerman. Right? It was really extreme. And I thought, well, wow, what's going on there? Because it wasn't.
I hate to think.
It wasn't a normal human reaction, right? I mean, okay, you're a politician. There's worse things she could have been called than Mrs. Murrell.
Yeah, it sounds like he went all Will Smith on her. I'm surprised he didn't step down from the platform, walk over and slap him, and say, keep Mrs. Murrell's name out of your mouth.
You make a good point, but the thing is, he's not married to her. What was he doing that for? Why did you think it was disrespectful? Now, it was. I reflected on this later, and I thought, well, actually, it's a very un-British thing for him to do, because in Britain we have a healthy disrespect for our politicians, and we always have done. And this is a good thing. This is a positive thing. If you go back to the 19th century, when frankly the politicians were way better than the ones we've got now, the newspapers and cartoons lampooning them were vicious, right? They did not pull punches.
Oh yeah.
And the public had a fairly, at least a healthy skepticism about the people who claimed the right to rule over us. And he was saying basically, no, you must show this woman respect. Well, why? Why should we show respect? Respect's earned. If the person doesn't feel respectful, why should he feign it? Because that's a profoundly un-British thing to do. It's an un-Scottish thing to do. I know he's from Pakistani heritage, but born in Glasgow. And I don't obviously know what that's like from personal experience, but it was one of the most it was quite a foreign thing to do. It was a foreign approach that he was bringing. I don't know where he got it from. I don't think it was anything to do with Pakistani heritage. As far as I know, I think it was a personal thing. It came across as a personal thing that was just him. But it was a weird response. And that's what he did. And I thought from that point, well, I really don't trust this guy. Because there was also the uncontrolled aspect. And we've seen this also with, I don't know if you saw Deke Jackson, who was standing on basically a libertarian ticket when Humza was introducing all the hate crime, oppressive, fascist legislation. And Deke Jackson stood against him and went along to satirise Humza. And Humza, again, lost the rag, lost his temper, started yelling at him about being a homophobe, and do you want to be a homophobe in your own home? Do you want to be a racist in your own home? All this sort of stuff. It was so intemperate. And again, I don't think that's cultural. I think that's him.
That's a good point. That's a good point, because you know the famous video of him on his scooter going down Holyrood Hall in Holyrood, and he trips over himself, and that went viral that day. Now, most of us would be like, oh, for crying out loud, I made a twit of myself there.
Yeah.
But you just let it fly, you just leave it, and you maybe make a joke against yourself just to show you're in with the joke. Well, his reaction was to tweet out about how annoyed, why on earth would somebody do this and put this out to laugh at me? You know, he was offended by the fact that somebody had obviously put this out, not realizing, no, that's not in this case, that's not the right response. Just go with the flow and have a laugh at yourself. But no, he didn't. So that's doing exactly what you're saying there, is he takes himself extremely seriously. And
we've played that clip. We've played that clip a few times on the call.
Yes.
It has come up.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not surprised. As, of course, as the other famous clip of his, which is him berating everybody for being white.
Yes, that's actually far more worrying. Now, I've tried to reach out to him on this because the definition of white is quite interesting. Because there's an American politician who is of African ethnic origin, but is conservative and Christian, and he's been called the black face of white supremacy, right? So you can be white irrespective of what skin colour you've got. Under the woke ideology, white doesn't mean peely-wally. White means peely-wally and a whole lot of other things.
Right.
And whilst if you actually are Caucasian, you probably can't ever get away from that original sin in the way that the woke look at you. You can inherit that if you are, irrespective of what colour you have to be. And so I reached out to him to say, like, okay, saw your speech. What do you mean by white? And also reached out to Sarwar, who he nicked the speech from, who said something very similar about 6 months before.
Unfortunately so, yeah.
And asked him the same question. I've asked them each 3 times, and they will not respond. I cannot get a response. I want to understand their definition of white. Because it's, if you support the monarchy, that's an example of whiteness. If you support 2 + 2 = 4, that's whiteness.
Apparently, I was reading that as well, yeah.
The way the woke is going, anything that's rational, anything that's organised, anything that is disciplined, anything that is, shall we say, successful, they're now defining as whiteness, right? Now, this is obviously crazy. It's also very, very toxic for, say, a black teenager growing up in an inner city environment who's been told that his entire identity is tied up with uncontrolled behaviour and failure, right? I mean, what worse thing could you tell a teenager? I can't imagine anything more cruel. So it's a very toxic ideology, no matter what skin colour you happen to be. But he used the word, and I wanted to understand what he thought he was saying, right? Because it sounded like he just didn't like Scottish people. It sounded like, was it Edward the First as a claim to be said, the problem with Scotland is it's full of Scots. It seemed to be that's what he was saying. There might be more to it. I tried to find out. I couldn't find out.
Yeah. Well, good point. Regarding that Edward the First quote, I think that's actually a Mel Gibson quote. I don't think it can actually be found in the records, but it certainly worked in the film very well. But you're right. And what's interesting now is, though, now that he is the First Minister, is he going to stop with that language? And is he going to say, yeah, after all, Scotland's not racist. I'm sorry I got all of that wrong, because obviously I'm now First Minister, and so take back everything I said? Or is he just going to, is it not actually going to make any difference to his worldview? And I think it will, of course, be the latter, because I think we'll all still be as racist as we ever were, apparently, even though he's now the First Minister. Well, that's the way I think it's probably likely to go. And if you disagree with that, then he'll bring in another hate law to say that you can't defame the First Minister.
So he's the First Minister. Someone whose family came from the same part of the Punjab is the leader of the Labour Party.
That's right.
And this is on I don't know what the Asian population of Scotland is, 3% or something. It's not huge. So they're doing
How
fine.
did that happen?
And not sure actually. But okay, right? I mean that's fine. But you can't simultaneously say that the entire society is systemically racist, and this is the attack on it. This is the attack on the West as a whole. The entire society is systemically racist, that it must be destroyed because the racism is so ingrained. Every historical achievement must be denigrated. Everything must be viewed through this hypersensitized view of what they term race. Not, I personally think, a coherent concept anyway. But what they term race, which is all to do with skin pigmentation, they want everything to be viewed through this prism. Now, that's harmful. It gets people at one another's throats. It generates problems. But it's clearly not true, because otherwise he wouldn't be First Minister.
Yeah. It's we're in for some interesting times, I think. It's something that Scotland is definitely going to go through an interesting point of view. And if we at Force for Good are for the union, we believe in that, and we wonder if it's going to help or hinder the union. It may not, of course, make much difference from our particular point of view. We're going to keep doing what we're doing, which is standing up to the Scottish nationalists. We're going to keep promoting the benefits of solidarity and unity in the United Kingdom. We're going to keep writing and researching and promoting about our unitary British history. We're not going to be stopped or put out of our path in any way. But in the wider view of things, I wonder how it's going to play out. I suppose it's all depends on lots of different things, including how happy the membership of the SNP are with him, and to what extent his fellow MSPs are going to allow him to continue in the role. Do you see a bright future for him?
No, I mean I've always thought that if Humza gets it, he'll fly the whole thing into a mountain. He'll
really?
Yeah. Now I could be wrong, because I never really got the Sturgeon effect, because Nicola Sturgeon was this unhappy. I mean, she was called Nippy Sweetie for a reason, right? Unhappy, not very likeable political nerd, right? But that's what she came across as. They had, within the SNP, they had this programme to make her more relatable. Right? And the wags inside the SNP called it Operation Human Being. Right? So they knew the problem. And I thought the likability problem never really went away. Now, I've met her once in person, and it was quite interesting because the initial response was ordinary lassie seemed fine, right? Didn't seem a problem. When I pushed her a little bit, I got what was clearly a scripted response. It was like hitting the replay button about, here's the set answer to what you're asking me. And it was like talking to someone who'd just been well drilled.
Yeah.
Don't think about it, this is the answer. Right? That's the impression I got. And when I pushed again, I saw anger. I don't know what to make of that. It was a short exchange, right? But she didn't like being pushed. And so, but I never really got why. I mean, she was quite good at deflecting, right? She'd mastered the deflector shield technique. She'd mastered the ability to talk as though she actually believes what she's saying, right? And just ignore all the facts, and that was it. And the other politicians quite rated. I mean, I spoke to one or two Conservative politicians. They thought she was quite good. I never did, because she was so absent of the ability of like statecraft and actually building a nation. She was just destroying the nation. If you were, right, leaving aside pro-union and anti-union, if you're trying to build up Scotland to a point where it can be actually independent, you would do the exact opposite of everything Nicola ever did. Right? The exact opposite. So she didn't seem to have the intelligence or the ability to do this, but I never got why people kind of tolerated it or voted for it. So maybe Humza will surprise me, because I could be wrong on him as well. But I always felt that there would be a move that the people of Scotland would take one look at him and just say, nah, that's a step too far.
That may indeed be what is going to happen, and we'll have a much better idea after the general election, which is likely to happen sometime next year, whether in the spring or the autumn or indeed the winter of next year. We will know. And so he's when you think about it there, you know, he's got about, say it's in May next year, that's just a year in. He's got 12 months. That's not a long time to make an impression and to put together a winning team and to make things happen. So it's all to play for, David. It's the top of the hour almost. We've been speaking almost for half an hour. It's been a great conversation. Lots of good points that we've made tonight. Thank you very much for your input. We've been putting up your addresses for people to get to you. UK Column broadcasts every day at ukcolumn.org. And they're also on Facebook at facebook.com/UK Column and on twitter.com/UK Column. Ignore that last one, that's a mistake. It's just UK Column. Twitter.com/UK Column. So check out UK Column, folks, and you'll see David regularly, along with a lot of other great analysts who have got a lot to say. You're the Scottish expert there, but all the others are expert in their own field. Any closing words, David?
One time we must have a longer conversation about this. What is the SNP? The SNP, in a large regard, has become an anti-British alliance. Right? The only thing that unites them is their animosity towards the idea of the British. And this is strange because obviously the Scots are British, so it makes them this strange thing. They're an anti-Scottish Scottish National Party, which is a very bizarre beast, and it brings up all of these contradictions. I know we're out of time, but maybe some other time we can have a deeper dig into those issues.
Absolutely. Well, what we'll do is our assistant producer will contact you and we'll get that rigged up for a time at your convenience, because that sounds like a really good thing that we could put together. Great stuff, David. Just remains for me to say thanks very much. More power to your elbow. as always, and hopefully we'll see you back shortly.
Been a real pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Good night, David.
Good night.
Bye now. Good stuff. Good stuff. That was David Scott. Alan says, thanks, David. Catherine says, brilliant. TC says, very good. Martin McGinn says, let's have a longer chat. PBC said, good to hear David and Alistair talk sense, and thanks very much for your comments, PBC. Now, before close of play, we will tell you who won the competition, and we'll also mention to you that issue 8 of our magazine Union Heart is going to be in the office on Friday, and it will be going free of charge to all the people who are already receiving our magazine. That is our monthly donors who have requested a copy of our magazine. The spring issue is 12 pages, and it's devoted to this, the 420th anniversary of the Union of the Crowns, when the Scots King James VI became also the King of England and would consequently declare himself to be King of Great Britain. The Union of the Crowns, the man who the Great Seal of Scotland that Humza Yousaf was looking at today, the man who designed that design, and among much else which we explore in a fascinating magazine which took me, myself and my colleagues, took us a month to put together, and that will be in the office and on Friday. So if you'd like a free copy, then just simply become a Union supporter, please, at our website, aforceforgood.uk/union-supporters, and that really does help. And for 69 pence a week, which works out at £3 a month, which works out at £36 a year, you can really help the cause, and we really do need that. We've got a programme of spring and summer activism lined up. One or two things that are really going to blow your socks off, or one or two ideas that we've got that we're turning into reality, and it's going to be a very interesting spring and summer of activism, but we do need our monthly donors to help us. So if you've thought about it, and if you haven't done it, then please do consider signing up there at aforceforgood.uk/union-supporters. Great stuff. Great stuff. Now, we have a winner, I'm glad to say. Now, we asked the question on this day, the 29th of March in 1871, what great British concert venue was opened by Queen Victoria? And the answer, of course, was the Royal Albert Hall. And the winner is Debbie. Fantastic. Fantastic, Debbie. You will get this badge coming your way tomorrow. Glad and happy to send that to such a fantastic supporter. And it's a collector's item because we had several hundred of these done, and they've all gone out, they've all been sold, and we're down now just to one, which we'll offer as a prize sometime in the future this year, unless I can find one or two down the back of a sofa, which I doubt. Great stuff. Great stuff. Folks, please do also get our wee book for the Union. And somebody mentioned there in the comments about the T-shirt. This is our AFFG T-shirt, which you can get at our link, which we'll put in the that's it, A Force for Good. Well, it's a long one, but yeah, great stuff. Trying to get a screenshot. There we go. We will be back with a guest. It will be Niall Fraser, and that will be next week. Looking forward to speaking to him. And thank you for all the folk that have come in tonight and for all your comments, and we'll hopefully, God willing, see you next week. It just remains for me to say God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next week.